Hi, this is my review of Mörk Borg. This is perhaps one of the more unique dark fantasy or perhaps bleak fantasy role-playing games that you will see in current times. Mörk Borg feels a lot like they took a doom metal or black metal album and they decided to transform it, to turn it into a role-playing game experience. It's quite apocalyptic, quite shameless. The style is very original, very unique, both in its application of very rules light gameplay, but also the aesthetic, the graphic style. It looks perfect to what it's trying to communicate or represent. Now let's talk about the quality of the PDF. The quality is excellent, superb. I couldn't spot a single typo. The organization is quite amazing because it's chaotic and at the same time there is a method to the madness. There are some sections of this book that are neatly organized, but most of them they look so chaotic, so organic, so raw. Everything is very well written and explained. Everything is quite old school. And when it comes to the graphic design, the art style, and the style of the writing itself, it kind of feels like they took religious texts, the madness of the Malus Maleficarum, the cryptic and obsessive methods of a most dangerous grimoire, and they just wrapped it all together. They splashed some paint on it, and that's basically the overall style of Mörk Borg, both in its writing and the illustrations and the graphic design in general. And the entire document is fully bookmarked, so it's going to be very easy for you to move through the entire PDF. There are even some hyperlinks. You have a map, and any region, any zone that you click, it's going to take you to the paragraph describing that zone, region, that site. The illustrations and images are bleak, gothic, tragic, depressing, savage. So overall, Mörk Borg feels like you took the blackest, most depressing, most bleak aspects of black metal, doom metal, and just inserted them into this sort of black metal zine type of document. Now let's talk about the contents. At the start of the book, you have a set of random tables to determine the name of your characters or the non-player characters that the players are going to encounter. You also have a list of occult treasures that you could find, like for example, a bird cage that slays whatever is placed behind its bars slowly, and then that which has died inside of the cage reanimates, an undead that is very strong. You could also find perhaps a pearl that if you drop it in complete darkness, it can aid you in finding the exit from that dark place. You also have a ring that pretty much anything that goes through it, it is destroyed, obliterated. These are the types of treasures that you can find in Mörk Borg. Some of them are terrible, some of them are useful. You also have corpse plundering. What did you find in the remains of that corpse? Maybe there's a map to a place that cannot possibly exist. Or maybe there is a death mask of one of the player characters on the corpse. Or maybe you find an unmarked bottle with a liquid that constantly shifts between two colors. You also have a table for traps and devilry. Maybe you find a well-dressed corpse that is booby-trapped. Maybe you find an urn that releases a ghost. Or maybe you find coins coated in grime and poison. You also have a table to determine weather. Maybe there's hammering rain, piercing wind, an irritating drizzle, or crackling frost. So as you can see, this role-playing game is all about the frost-bitten winds, the dark places of the world, the untamed and lethal wilderness, and lost souls wandering through obscure forests. Then we have an introduction to the setting of Mörk Borg. The setting is quite insane. It is intentionally left with many holes and ambiguous explanations as to what is going on. This is an apocalyptic role-playing game. You basically have a basilisk, a two-headed basilisk that is constantly producing prophecies. It's constantly talking about doom and death and the inevitable perdition of all. And there is a religion, a cult, built around this basilisk and its prophecies. This is the dominant religion of Mörk Borg. There are other deities, entities, and powers, but all of them point to certain death, destruction, decadence, corrosion, or entropy. So it is a very bleak setting. The characters participating in this game world are existing in a world of complete darkness and hopelessness. The world is constantly dying. The apocalypse is happening. So the player characters are doing the best that they can in order to obtain power, glory, hidden knowledge, riches, while being quite monsters themselves at the same time. This is a role-playing game of humans, but they have been twisted by the taint that surrounds them. You have a complete map of all of the regions of the game. Now let me give you some brief information of the places that you can visit. You have Galgenvek. In the land of Thuland, this is the greatest city that ever was. No king or queen rules in Galgenvek, but an archpriestess, Josilfa Migol. Deep beneath the cathedral of the two-headed basilisks, in a cool black chamber crossed by shards of light, lies her throne. You also have Sarkash. This is a forest that spreads unnaturally fast. Paths tangle and wind in the overgrown gloom lead wanderers astray. You also have the Palace of the Shadow King. This is a gothic black castle, like a mirror to the cathedral of the two-headed basilisk in Galgenvek. Most of the palace lies in crumbling ruins, home to unfortunate souls sheltering beneath its broken halls. You also have Grift. From ages past, Grift grew upon an eastern peninsula of the Endless Sea. Cut from the world by the bottomless Mur, the thriving city-state can be reached only by 3 bridges of such might and cyclopean size, it is said only enslaved giants could have raised them. You also have Kergus. Desolation rolls over Kergus like a frost-barren wind. The lawless and forlorn trek across its ice-racked expanse, crawling over the plains or cowering in the cracked earth to flee Blood Countess and Thalia. You also have the Western Kingdom, called Vasteland in the songs of the simple and rhymes of the poor, once home to peace and wealth, when Lake Onda gifted fish and the river trade thrived. Now terror and despotism stalk. You also have the Valley of the Unfortunate Undead. Rumors whisper that the basilisk He is coiled within its crypts, a sight infrequently survived. Lies and legends enshroud the valley, obscuring any truth. You also have the Calendar of Necrovel. This is a great thematic and mechanical asset to the game. You can even determine the apocalypse with this calendar. But normally you can use it by rolling a die each day, and a result of 1 activates 1 misery, and you determine this misery randomly. These miseries are represented by psalms, and you even have a 7th misery, a 7th doom. This happens when the world finally dies. The 7th seal is broken for the 7th and final time. The game and your lives end here. Burn the book. That's literally what it says, burn the book. So this is a misery that you can activate if you're playing an apocalyptic campaign with a predefined ending. Maybe Mörk Borg, the setting itself, happens in several different realities, so you can play the apocalypse as many times as you want. Now let me show you some of the miseries that could happen according to your result and based on these psalms. The city shall be made hollow. Of those who rest in hollowness, they shall not be seen. Or perhaps, as at the beginning, so at the end, all manner of fly and wasp shall fill the air. Maybe the great shall be made poor, and the poor poorer still. Perhaps, for 5 days and 5 nights, mother's flesh shall be the cloak of demons. Maybe the lake and brook shall blacken, and the water become star. Or perhaps you shall know the last day is come, the sun shall set and never rise again. So as you can see, very bleak and perdition-filled results. Now we get to character creation. When it comes to the type of characters that you can create in this game, they are all humans, but they have been transformed, affected by the rotten atmosphere and ambience around them, by the overall taint that cloaks the entire world. You start out with a number of randomly determined pieces of silver. You also start with food, and you can also get some additional things, like for example a backpack or a donkey. Perhaps you start with a rope or a medicine chest, or maybe you start with a group of monkeys in your possession or a grappling hook. You can never predict what you are going to get with each play. Now, the process of character creation is quite simple. First, you randomize your starting equipment, like I mentioned. You also randomize your weapons and your armor. You roll your abilities, you roll your hit points, and you name your character. It says here, name your character if you wish, it will not save you. This is a classless system in its standard form. You can create everything about your player character, but you have optional rules that offer a few more random things like a character class, some omens and such. We will talk more about that in a few moments. So you can play this game as a classless game, as a game with character classes, or a combination of both. I really like the way that they present weapons in this game. You have these different illustrations telling you the damage that each weapon deals, and you have categories of armor in broad terms. That is, you have light armor, which could be padded armor or leather armor. You have medium armor that could be scale armor or mail armor, and you also have heavy armor that could be splint or plate armor, etc. These are broad categories that will give you damage reduction, and you also have a shield that offers protection, but you can even sacrifice your shield to ignore all damage from one attack. But obviously the shield breaks. Now, scrolls or magic in this game never work when you are wielding two-handed weapons or medium or heavy armor. So every character in this game is potentially a spellcaster. Because of some different traits and abilities that you can take, some characters will be a bit more skilled in obtaining such knowledge and employing it, but in general everyone can be a spellcaster, but magic in this game can lead to some dire and tragic results, as we will see later on. You have a list of equipment, everything that is necessary for your average adventurer or scoundrel. You have hammers, heavy chains, iron nails, meat cleavers, tents, toolboxes, torches, lamps, and the weapons that you can obtain are crossbows, clubs, battle axes, zweihanders, and yes, you can also use a femur. If you don't have a weapon, you can just pick up a bone and fight with it, or rip it from your enemies. You also have services, the price on how to bribe a guard or a clerk, the price for a meal and drink. You also have the prices to repair your armor and to own beasts. You could purchase a dog or a horse or perhaps even a rat. Now let's talk about abilities. You have 4 categories or 4 stats of abilities. Agility, which is about protecting yourself, balancing yourself, swimming. You also have presence, which is about aiming, charming, and wielding powers. Strength, which has to do with crushing, lifting, and striking. And toughness, which is related to resisting poison, cold, heat. These categories may not make too much sense. For example, presence seems like a combination of intelligence with dexterity and charisma, but this is intentional for ease of play, to only consider 4 things and reduce statistic granularity. Now, when you determine your abilities, you're not going to be writing the result of your rolls. You're going to take note of the modifiers. So you're going to be writing +1, +2, -2. This eliminates unnecessary information in your character sheet for a more minimalistic style of play. Now, when it comes to tests or checks in this game, you make these tests against a difficulty rating. Depending on how difficulty, it could be perhaps only 6 for simple tasks. Maybe the task is quite average, you would only need to roll 12 or above. But maybe you want to attempt some task that it simply looks to be impossible to accomplish or to succeed at, you will need to roll 18 or above. So your ability is added to your d20 roll, and you need to reach this difficulty number or above it to be successful at a task. So let's say that you want to break something. You would roll your d20, you would add your strength of, let's say, +2, and you need to roll perhaps 12 or above that. So it's quite simple. Now when it comes to carrying capacity, this is determined by your strength, and some items may be too large for you to carry without some penalties to your actions. And if you surpass your encumbrance or carrying capacity, every test that requires strength and agility will be more difficult. And there are some loads that are simply just impossible to carry around with you. Now when it comes to hit points, and now just look at this image of hit points. I was somewhat worried on using this image because you know how YouTube sometimes acts very strange. The other time I got a thumbnail for my Black Madonna review of KULT Divinity Lost. A few weeks ago they simply took down my thumbnail of the cover, and the cover is not scandalous or anything. You can check it out in the description of this video. So I don't know why they took that down, and I'm taking a chance at showing you this image of the heart. But I think that in worst case scenario they will only add an age restriction to this review. But as you can see here, you have hit points information determined by your toughness, and you have 2 subcategories depending on how much damage you take. If your hit points reach 0, you are broken. Maybe your character falls unconscious. Maybe you end up with a broken or severed limb. But if you get negative hit points, you are dead. So this is a very gritty, lethal, no-nonsense sort of game when it comes to taking damage and combat. Now let's talk about combat. You determine initiative quite easily. You roll a single 6-sided die, and if you roll 1 to 3, the enemies go first. 4 to 6, the player characters go first. You also have a method to determine individual initiative, adding agility to the roll. Now, something important to consider in this role-playing game concerning combat is that the players are the only ones making the rolls. The game master or referee focuses completely on handling the story, making sense of the situation, of the different factors and elements within the game. The game master will be making some rolls when determining things concerning the structure of the adventure, different effects, treasure, adventure seeds, etc. But when it comes to combat and all of the different checks, the players are the only ones that are going to be making those rolls. So if you want to attack with a melee weapon, you test your strength against a difficulty number. If you want to make a ranged attack, you test presence. And then you need to test agility for your defense. If you fail your defense roll, the enemy hits you, and your armor is the only thing that will save you from certain death. Enemies attack once per round unless noted otherwise, and the difficulty rating for each test can be modified depending on different situations on the battlefield, tactics, strategies, environmental elements or hazards. This is an old school type of combat in which the players are describing what they want their characters to do, and the game master or referee is making sense of it all and adding the necessary adjustments to this difficulty rating. You also have a table for when you get a critical hit. When you roll a natural 20, you deal double damage to your enemy, and the enemy's armor protection is reduced by 1 tier. Your armor is going to get damaged until it is completely ruined. And if you roll a natural 20 in defense, you actually get a free attack. However, you could also fumble. If you roll a 1, the weapon breaks or is lost. And in defense, you take double damage and your armor is reduced in tier, in protection. You also have information on what happens when you rest. When you catch your breath, when you have a drink, you gain a few hit points. You need a full night's rest to heal more. And without food or drink, you will start to die slowly. And an infected character does not benefit from resting. You actually lose hit points daily instead. You also have a table to determine the reaction of the different characters or creatures that you encounter. And you also have information on how to make morale checks to see if the enemies are fleeing because of things that are not going in their favor during a battle. Now, what happens when your character levels up? The Game Master decides when a character should be improved. It can be after completing a scenario, killing mighty foes, or bringing home treasure. When this happens, you gain more hit dice, you find some additional things, perhaps you find silver, or some unclean or sacred scroll. Your abilities improve, hopefully. And now let's talk about powers that you can use, perhaps of the choices that you took during character creation, or due to scrolls that you find in your journeys. You roll presence plus a d4 every morning to determine how many times you can use powers for that day. You choose from your available scrolls, and when you read a magical scroll, you test presence. If you succeed, the power is activated and you subtract 1 use from your daily total. If you fail, the power doesn't work. You lose hit points, you become dizzy for the next hour, and depending on how bad the result, maybe something even worse happens. Now, what types of spells can you cast? Maybe you could use the Tongue of Eris. A creature of your choice is confused for 10 minutes. Maybe you employ Foul Psychopomp. You summon skeletons or zombies. Or maybe you cast death upon your foes. Maybe you cast Grace for a sinner. So a creature of your choice gets a bonus to one of their rolls. Or maybe you cast Whispers past the gate. You ask a number of questions to a deceased creature. Or maybe you cast Hermetic Step, finding all traps in your path for a number of minutes. You have a section detailing what the basilisks demand. The two-headed basilisk asks for something. Maybe it wants a widower's wedding ring. Maybe it desires a dagger onto which the condemned carved their victim's name. Or maybe it wants a child born with the third eye. Like I mentioned earlier, the basilisk is of great religious importance. The dogmas and doctrines in the setting are based around it. Next we have omens. These are determined randomly when you create your character. You gain a number of omens that could allow you to deal maximum damage with one attack, or perhaps lower damage that has been dealt to you, or lower the difficulty of different tests. These are connected to the fate or the luck that your character was born with. You can also determine trauma, any sort of bad childhood, hidden history, twisted fate that also comes with your character's existence in this world. Maybe your character is endlessly aggravated, maybe he is egocentric or vindictive. Maybe you have a broken body, you have a staring manic gaze. Maybe you lost 3 toes and you limp. Maybe you are quite corpulent, ravenous, and drooling. Maybe you have a chronic athlete's foot and it stinks. Maybe your character obsessively collects small sharp stones. Maybe your character is never able to get to the point. Maybe your character is a nihilist, or maybe a pyromaniac, or your character stutters when he is lying. Then we have troubling tales. This can be used to determine the background of the entire party of adventurers or of each individual character. Maybe you deserted the military after witnessing a massacre. So now you have a bounty on your head. You are hunted by former friends. Or maybe you are cursed to share the nightmares of others. You sleep far, far away. Or perhaps your flesh heals twice as fast, but your companions twice as slow. You see a many-eyed guardian angel. Then we have arcane catastrophes. These are the things that could happen when the spells go wrong. Maybe one by one your teeth fall out. Long, brittle fingernails replace them in your gums, and your smile is horrific and you find it hard to eat. Or maybe your eyes burn with insufferable agony, bleeding heavily before loosening and falling from their gory pits. You continue to see through them wherever they are. Maybe the power works, the power of the spell that you are using, but the fate or a demonic force perverts its effects to your precise disadvantage. Or if you are really unlucky and you roll the same result twice, you explode in screaming black fire in which the faces of the dead are seen. You take damage each round and water only feeds this fire, so it's kinda like a mystery how to save yourself from that. Maybe by using urine. or vinegar. Next, we have the optional classes. You have the Fanged Deserter. You have 30 or so friends who never let you down, your teeth. Disloyal, deranged, or simply uncontrollable, any group that didn't boot you out, you left anyway. But your parliament of teeth, enormous, protruding, thick and sharp, have always been your allies. So you have a powerful biting attack. You are deformed. You also have some memories and abilities. For example, your earliest memories. Maybe you remember a burnt black building in Sarkash. Was it your home? Maybe you remember sleeping with dogs in the corner of an inn, waiting for someone to return. When it comes to your abilities, the Fanged Deserter is quite strong, but not very bright. And you also start out with some unique traits, like a crumpled monster mask, which strikes primitive fear into lesser creatures like goblins, gnomes, and children. While worn, they check morale every round. Or maybe you have Wizard Teeth. 4 weird teeth rattle within a blackened pouch. Before battle, you roll a d6 for each one, and for every 6 that you roll, one of your attacks deals maximum damage. Or maybe you have an Ancient Gorehound, which is asthmatic, deluded, and on its last legs. This wizened creature still has a superb nose and can sniffle up treasure in the most disgusting debris. It can also attack, but it can also take damage as well. It becomes frenzied around goblins and berserkers. Next, we have the Gutter-born Scum. An ill star smiled upon your birth. Poverty, crime, and bad parenting didn't help either. In your community, an honest day's work was never an option. I forgot to mention that with each of these optional classes, you start with a variable number of hit points, silver pieces, and omens. In the case of the Gutter-born Scum, when it comes to abilities, he is not very strong, but he is quite stealthy and agile. You have special abilities or traits such as the Coward's Jab. When attacking by surprise, you test your agility. On a success, you automatically hit once with a light one-handed weapon, dealing extra damage. You also have the Escaping Fate ability. Every time you use an omen, there is a 50% chance it is not spent. There's also Excretal Stealth. You have an astounding, almost preternatural ability to hide in muck, debris, and filth. Now, it's also important to note that all of these different abilities that I mentioned, you only get one that is randomly determined during character creation. Now, when it comes to the origins or bad birth of the Gutter-born Scum, maybe you were dumped into a moving shit cart still in your birth call. Or maybe you were raised by rats in the gutters of Grift. Or maybe you escaped the Dwelandian Orphanarium. Another interesting thing about this class, the Gutter-born Scum, is that the first time the Scum gets better, that is, they level up, another specialty is rolled. And the second time that this happens, the Scum rerolls these 2 specialties, or just one. So this is a very versatile class. Then we have the Esoteric Hermit. The stone of your cave is one with the stars, silence and perfection. Now the chaos of a fallen world disturbs your rituals, and the call of night grows blacker than your cavern's gloom. Irritating. So this class specializes in the use of magic. You have a lot of presence, but are quite weak in terms of strength. You have things such as Master of Fate. What use are maps when the substance of causality itself is open to you? You know the right way when you make a presence test. You also have Bard of the Undying. You learned your melodies in the other world. So the music of your harp gives you a bonus on reaction rolls. Maybe you have a hawk as a weapon. Your crafty, almost intelligent hawk is loyal only to you. Even without shared language, you understand its cries, and it keeps watch, scouts and swoops to attack foes. You also have eldritch origins, such as suddenly awakening in a ritual circle underneath the northern bridge to Grift. Or maybe you have wandered, memoryless, from the mouth of a cavern at the cliffs of Therion. Maybe you were raised on a lonely island in Lake Onda. No one else has ever heard of this island, and you can't return. Then we have the Wretched Royalty. Bowed down only by the memories of your own lost glory, you could never submit to anyone else, not you of noble blood. Now, as a noble, because of your life of comfort, you are somewhat average in your abilities, but when it comes to some gifts or special powers that you can use, you have the Blade of your Ancestors. This magnificent and clearly magical talking sword is foppish, unreliable, and quietly despises you. It taunts your failures and, if continually disappointed, develops a 1 in a 6 chance to accidentally attack you or your companions. However, you deal more damage with it, and you have improved attack and defense. Maybe you have the snakeskin gift. An expensive sandalwood box bound in snakeskin. It contains a seemingly ordinary dagger wrapped in silk. However, the dagger, besides dealing damage, has the possibility of killing the target instantly from a deadly poison whipping from the blade. Now, when it comes to origins, maybe your Vastland Palace was reduced to rubble. Or maybe your caravan kingdom of Tutland fell into penury. Then we have the heretical priest. Haunted by the two-headed basilisk of the one true faith, this heretic can be found raving in ruins, traipsing endlessly down dusty roads and desecrating cathedrals by night. You are insightful, and because of that you have high presence, but you are also quite frail, not very good in matters of strength. As unholy origins, maybe your cult was massacred and you are the only survivor. Or maybe you came from the crypts of Grift. Maybe you come from the temple ruins in the Valley of the Unfortunate Undead. When it comes to special powers and abilities, maybe you have the Sacred Shepherd's Crook. Its head a hook of human bone inscribed with overlapping anti-prayers. This crook hooks through other worlds. This staff does considerable damage, except to faithless humans. You also have a list of sins, perhaps, a long and accurate document cross-referenced against reality to discover unseen evildoers. Successful presence checks result in a strange light surrounding evil creatures, and the owner of this list defends with a bonus against any being discovered this way. So this is going to be great against invisible enemies or ethereal creatures or demons. You also have a crucifix. It can be used in encounters with the undead as well as lesser trolls and goblins. So you check morale to see if the creatures bow and kindly remove themselves. Next we have the Occult Herbmaster. Born of the mushroom, raised in the glade, watched by the eye of the moon in a silver-black pool. You are quite capable when it comes to having high toughness, but you are low in strength, perhaps because of the strange substances that you are consuming. You also have a portable laboratory to create your concussions. Your origins, well, you were probably raised in calm isolation in the Starkash Dark. Or maybe you came from the heretic isle of Krelut, 2 nautical miles east of Grift. Or you come from the ruins of the Shadow King's manse, thick with memories of mushrooms and smoke. When it comes to the type of things that you can create, maybe you can create a red poison that deals a lot of damage. Maybe you can create a black poison that could even blind your enemy. Perhaps you know the recipe for spider owl soup, which allows you to see in darkness, climb on walls for 30 minutes as well. Now, I love all of these character classes. I definitely recommend that you choose one of these optional classes. They are quite flavorful, but their special abilities, they are so thematic and so fun to use in my opinion. And you never know what you're going to get when you create a new character. All of these abilities are determined randomly. There are a few abilities you always start with, but I think it's going to be quite exciting to see what you're going to be getting with each character that you create. Next we have a bestiary. I'm going to keep things ambiguous here to avoid spoilers. Maybe your game master or referee wants to keep things mysterious and secretive. So you have goblin-like creatures. You have here the Seth. You also have scum or killers such as the Bent. You have berserkers. You have raids. You have Velse, which is a blood-drenched skeleton. You have Alish, of course. Trolls. Zombies. Cursed dolls. Grotesque gargoyle-looking things. It literally says things with an X. There's also a wickhead knife wielder, a wyvern, and you even have a list of different vagrants, scoundrels, followers that you can recruit, some of them more unusual than others. So you have the Earthbound, the Wild Wickhead, the Pale One, the Prowler. After that you have a complete adventure, which is a dungeon crawl that you can use to start the game right away. I'm going to avoid spoilers with this one, but let me tell you that the organization and the things that you can play with as a game master when it comes to running this adventure is going to leave you amazed. This is one of the best organized dungeon crawls that I have seen. I'm just going to read a bit of it so you get a good idea of what is going on. You face execution for heretical theft, but a masked seer, a courtier of the Shadow King, offered you a chance at life. The king's one true heir, his son Aldon, is missing. Without an heir, the Shadow King will eventually be forced to hand his crown to his imbecile brother. Get him back discreetly and wealth, life, and freedom will be yours. It's believed Aldon is imprisoned in an infamous underground locale, a place no free man would be willing to go, a place called the Accursed Den. So truly a neatly organized, awesome adventure with complete maps that are hyperlinked. Imagine this, you as a game master, as a referee, just need to click on any of the rooms on the maps and it will take you to the right entry. You will never be caught unaware when it comes to the choices that the player characters make, how they are taking things in unexpected directions. You just need to click on the right entry and it's going to take you right away to the types of hazards, enemies, mysteries and secrets that you can find in the different rooms. At the end of the book, you have even more tables that will allow you to generate adventures. If you like solo or co-op role-playing games, this is going to be great for you if you like using Game Master emulators like Mythic, or if you like to use Abraham's method, a method that I developed somewhat recently that will allow you to run any adventure as a solo game master with emulated player characters. I detailed the entire method in the video that I'm going to link in the description below. So with these tables, you can run any game, whether you are playing with a group, solo or cooperatively. So you have this section which says even more reasons to risk one's life. So where do you wander? Maybe in the center of Alliance, or maybe on a dirty Schleswig street. Or perhaps you are pretty much lost in Sarkash. Now who or what contacts you in this adventure? Perhaps a one-eyed woman who rules the thieves, or a tortured traitor, perhaps a sailor too long at sea, or a scoundrel covered in ulcers. And what's the adventure spark? Maybe 13 priests are missing. Perhaps the dead refuse to stay dead. Maybe you take part in a holy mass burial. Maybe an alchemist needs a living goblin. Or maybe the beast beneath the bridge is stalking you. You also have tables to generate an entire dungeon concept. So what's the name of this dungeon? Perhaps it's the Slaughtered Church, or maybe the Plague Grave, or the Torture Temple. Who or what dwells here now? Is it a Necrobell worshipping lich with a skeletal court? A vengeful cabal of undead porcelain dolls? Or Turgol's escaped experiment? What's the distinctive feature of this dungeon? Does it have some sort of portal to the land of the dead? Maybe there is an obelisk that separates body and soul. Or there are giant pools of boiling tar. What's the status of this dungeon? Is it still active? Or is it inactive because perhaps it was invaded? Or maybe everything ended in disaster. You also have a table to generate imminent danger within the dungeon. Maybe berserkers are constantly appearing inside of the rooms. Maybe a haunted cult intends to make the dungeon their new hideout. Maybe there's fire spreading from the deepest chamber. There are also sample rooms. Maybe you find a flooded room with obvious traps, with locked sarcophagi, and everything is utterly silent. Or maybe you find a stinky room. Perhaps it's a torture chamber in compact darkness, and there is a bonfire in the center. So all of these tables can spark ideas, entire dungeon concepts. They will not flesh out everything in the dungeon, but it's a solid start to create your own. After that, you have tables that you can use as a game master's screen with a summary of abilities, tests, the combat process, things related to adventuring, morale checks, powers, and scrolls. You also have a register of the world, the rules, and the creatures, all completely hyperlinked. So what do I think of Mörk Borg? This is an amazing work of art. If you enjoy bleakness, if you enjoy black metal or doom metal and you ever wondered how that would turn out if converted or translated into a role-playing game, this is the role-playing game for you. This is truly a rules-light experience that is heavy on everything else. There are some interesting role-playing games out there that feature all sorts of things, but it always feels like they are trying to emulate this sort of doom metal style. But Mörk Borg is doom metal. This is the genre made role-playing game. This is the incarnation of that bleak, dark, tenebrous, and tragic vibration. So I highly recommend that you get Mörk Borg if you enjoy rules-light games of old-school sensibilities, focusing on rulings and not in complex rules. This role-playing game is also very easy on the shoulders of the game master or referee. The players are going to be making all the rolls. The rules are very simple for you to understand and modify and apply different factors according to the situation. So combats are based on description, factoring in those modifiers or influences when it comes to attack rolls and defense rolls, making different skill checks as the players are navigating these dark cathedrals, blood-drenched abattoirs, and terrible black forests. I really love the bleak doom metal, horrifying Catholic style of the game. I think it seeps into both theme and rules, and the optional classes are just perfect. And in a few weeks I'm going to be reviewing Ferratory, which adds many good things to the core system. So my highest recommendation for Mörk Borg. The only reason why you would dislike this game is that if you do not like rules-light role-playing games, and you do not like the dark, bleak, apocalyptic setting. Everyone else is going to pretty much fall in love with this role-playing game. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those that have been sending DriveThruRPG gift certificates to support the channel. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.